Okay, so welcome everybody. My name is Dan Stern. I am the founder of College Essay Organizer, and I'm really excited for tonight's Expert Access webcast series. I want to give a shout out to College Prowler, who I know promoted the heck out of tonight's webcast. They're one of our great partners. So for those who are using College Prowler, and certainly those who are not yet familiar with it, explore College Prowler because it's a dynamite site. So we're going to start with a couple of quick polls just to get a sense of who is out there. And I'm going to turn over the reins to Lisa and Beth. So the first question, Lisa, can you see my screen now with a quick poll?
I don't see the quick poll, but I do see show my screen. But I don't
Gotcha.
see your quick poll.
Okay,
Would it
don't
be under
worry
the
about it.
attendees, maybe?
No, it's okay. The other
It's
members
off
are
air
seeing
poll
it.
it says off air poll in progress.
Exactly. Okay, so don't touch your screen yet. Let the people out there vote. The question is, who are you? Um, and it looks like about 78% are a senior applying to college. About 5% is a non-senior who's getting a jump start on this. 13%
Hmm.
is a parent of senior applying to college. 13% are both parent and student together. Wow, isn't it nice when parent and student can sit calmly next to each other
Bring them together, yeah.
and come together? Can't we all get along? And that is that. Okay. And for those math people out there who are uh, critiquing the fact that that doesn't add up to 100%, I was revealing the results as they were coming in. So all you little math whizzes out there. Okay, here is the next poll. Where are you from? We have people from all over the world. Last webcast, we had the majority of people actually from Asia and Europe. So I'm always curious where people are um, on this night, evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are on the planet. So looks like the vast majority are from the United States, about 90%. We have about 4% from Asia and 6% from South America. So welcome everybody. Okay. Um,
Welcome.
how many of our webcasts have you attended, including this one? So for those who are just joining us, we have an ongoing expert access webcast series where we have consultants and college admissions reps and a whole slew of experts in the college admissions process join us each week on various topics from the college essay to putting together your college application to putting together your college list to financial aid. So definitely join College Essay Organizer. You can get started for free. Just go to collegeessayorganizer.com and click on the little free link on the top right side, and you can upgrade to our webcast series and have access to all these incredible minds. So about 80% are here for the first time. Welcome. And it looks like an even breakdown throughout, including the 5+. So welcome all of our repeat students and parents. Okay, last poll here. Um, this is a subjective question, but generally, how competitive are the colleges you're applying to? So most competitive is typically the Ivy League, say the top 20 schools. Um, obviously, you should have a nice range of safeties, reaches, and targets on your list, if you're familiar with those terms. Um, but it seems as if about 40% are applying to the most competitive schools, 40% very competitive, 25% competitive, and that is it. So it looks like there are a lot of smart, eager, proactive students out there. Again, welcome everybody. We're really looking forward to this hour together. So allow me to introduce our two guest presenters tonight. Lisa Bleich is president of College Bound Mentor, which is based in New Jersey, my home state, and helps students find their personal plan for success.
Woo-hoo.
She is also the author of the forthcoming book, Surviving the College Application Process. So check that out, especially for the parents who maybe didn't plan the best and have younger children and want to get a real good feel for how to work successfully through this process. Again, the book is called Surviving the College Application Process. Beth Cassie works with Lisa at College Bound Mentor, and together they've worked with hundreds of students, helping them successfully navigate the college admissions process. So I'm now going to turn this over to Lisa and Beth. And one last point, on the right, you will see a control panel where you can submit your questions. I will be responding to a certain number of questions privately, meaning you can ask any question you want. For the most part, try to keep it relevant to the topic at hand. Um, And Lisa and Beth will be fielding some of these questions publicly, but hopefully we'll together get to all of your questions because, again, we want you to walk away from this hour with a real better understanding of the college essay process and tonight's theme, using the essays to tell your story. So without further ado, I will turn it over now to Lisa and Beth.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. We're really excited to be doing this, and we know that this is can be a very stressful time, especially if you're working towards those November 1st or even sometimes October 15th deadlines for early decision and early action. So we're going to go through and let's see. Dan, I'm not having control of my computer. Let's see if I do it this way.
Yeah.
Never mind. I figured it out. Okay. So what we want to just sort of do is just start with an overview of the different types of applications that are available. And I'm sure if you're sort of deep in the process, you might already have a sense. But Beth, why don't you walk us through that?
Okay. Well, typically we find that college applications fall into one of four categories. There are the data-only type of applications. These ask for your grades, your scores, perhaps a list of your activities, but there are no essay questions, no short answer questions. The next types of applications are really the schools that utilize the Common Application. While the Common Application, 500 schools and universities accept the Common Application. They gather data about your grades, your scores, your family background, and also there's a main piece of writing this, the personal statement, which is a 250 to 650 word essay. So you can see we have the Common Application broken into two categories here. There are some schools that will accept the Common Application alone. They ask for no supplemental information. The second group are schools that use the Common Application, but they also ask for supplemental information. This can be additional essays or additional short answer questions. And then really the last type of application we're going to discuss are school-specific applications with essays. So these are colleges that have chosen to use their own application and they require essays. MIT and Georgetown would be examples of private universities that use their own application. University of Texas system, the University of California's are also public universities that are school-specific applications.
All right, so let's talk a little bit. If you're sort of deep in the throes, you know the Common Application, the personal statement, there are 5 prompts. And they've changed this year, so if it's your first time applying, you don't know, but if those of you have any older kids, you may have seen some changes here. And they kind of break down into 5 different areas. And I think that the first one, which is that some students have a background that's really so central to their identity that your application would be complete without it. This is kind of twofold. First of all, if you have something that's so much marked your life or marked your transition as a person and influenced you, you're going to know what that story is. But if you also don't really like any of the other questions, this can be sort of a topic of choice question, because you can sort of make the argument that the story that you're trying to tell is so central to who you are as a person, and therefore that's why you want to choose this particular topic on that. The next one is to recount an incident or time when you failed. And so in this essay, what they're really trying to get at is the last part, which is really important, is how did it affect you and what lessons did you learn from it? So it's not enough to just talk about the failure. The failure is what I would call the inciting incident. It's the incident that sort of set the story in motion. But what's really important about this is how did it affect you, and then what did you learn from it? So make sure that if you do choose this one, that you really focus a lot of time on the how and the why.
The third prompt is reflect on a time when you challenged a belief or idea. What prompted you to act, and would you make that same decision again? And similar to what Lisa said, really what this is about is, what did you learn from doing this? What made you act, and what did you learn from that? Again, focusing more on the second part than on setting up the story.
Exactly. The next one is the describing a place or an environment where you're perfectly content. This one has actually been pretty popular among a lot of our students. And I think what's important about this one is to, A, be able to describe what it is that makes you so content. And then B, to sort of think about it in not necessarily it doesn't have to be a physical place. It could be an environment. For example, I had a student who wrote about the environment of working together collaboratively because he was a musician. And so he talked about how he used the collaborative environment that he had developed by working as a musician with his friends to transitioning that to being a leader and getting people to work together in Junior Statesmen. So that was sort of the environment of collaboration, the environment of working together. That was where he felt perfectly content. And then he sort of took that theme and used it for that essay.
Okay. And the last one, again, we found the fifth prompt, which is discussing an accomplishment or event that marked your transition from childhood to adulthood, has been another very popular one with the students that we're working with. Often when they're thinking about either a significant activity or event in their life, it focuses on that pivotal moment where they change from being the student to being the teacher. So a number of students have ended up using this fifth prompt.
Right. It could also be from when you were a camper to a counselor. It could be if you took on a job and you became responsible and then you kind of had to look at that. So again, think of it in a more broad sense. It doesn't necessarily have to be something incredible that was like a ceremony that you became an adult, but just a time where you really felt like that. So as far as the personal statement goes, and this is really for any college, the Common Application, and even the state or the school-specific ones, everything in your application tells what? It tells what you do, it tells what your grades are, but the essay is really the only place where you get to address the how and the why you do things. So it's really important that you address what drives you, what motivates you. So if you write something down that you decided that you wanted to join the school newspaper, and you wanted to write about something that was going on in the community, like a class that kids didn't like, then we need to understand why. You know, why was it that that was important to you? What motivated you to do that? What's important to you? Why? If you're going to be talking about why you responded to something in a certain way, or if you failed at something and you got really upset about it, then we need the backstory. Well, why did you respond that way? What was it? So you really have to dig deep into your psyche and really kind of go down and think very clearly about what it was that motivated you to do something that way.
Right. And really, at the real core, it's if you were sitting across from an admissions person, what is it that you want them to know about you? And that should be really coming through in your essay.
Exactly. How did you grow? How did you change? You know, that's what's really important. Okay, so some tips for writing a good essay. You may have heard in an English class or from other people that are reading it that you want to show, you don't want to tell. That's kind of a common term when it talks about writing. And so how do you show and not tell? The first is that you really want to give specific examples to demonstrate your point. So names of people who motivated you and why they motivated you. You really want, I always tell students that bring me there. Take me on that journey, and I want to be right there with you. So if you're talking about failing because you were doing an audition and you didn't follow along on the piano and you sang off key, I don't want you to just tell me that I didn't follow along on the piano, I didn't follow and I didn't, you know, sing on key. I want to know what's going through your mind. I want to be right there on the stage with you. I want to feel what you're feeling. I want to see if there's sweat dripping down your forehead. I want to see if your heart is palpitating. I want to see what you're feeling. All of those things make it a much more interesting story.
Right. And just to add on to what Lisa just said, one way to take the reader on your journey is to really focus on using your senses. You know, what did it look like, feel like, taste like, smell like, sound like? If you can use those types of ways to explain where you are in the story, the reader will be there with you. And really the last point is that you have to use your own voice. Admissions officers are savvy and they know the difference between a 17-year-old and an adult who's writing an essay.
Exactly. And for those parents of you who are listening in the audience, what I often would like kids to do is to write the essay on their own without any input from the parents, and then go back and forth several times, because remember, the first draft is usually going to be pretty bad, and so it's going to be a number of iterations. It's not like you can just write it the night before and expect it to work. And then when you read that essay, the question should be, does this sound like my student, my child? You know, do I get a sense of who you are as a person? Do I understand, like, is it your voice in there? And that's a really important marker for you.
Right. And sometimes we'll even say that with the student when we're sitting with them, especially if there's a phrase or two in an essay. And we'll say, would you really have said that? Or did you really think that? And they'll often say, well, no, but my mom did.
Exactly. Or, so that's something that you just want to be they understand what a 17-year-old writes like.
All right, so let's can I interject a quick question?
Sure.
Great, because we've had a few questions along the lines of this one question I'm going to read out. Um, the student writes, for the event that marked your transition, what if you wrote about when one of your parents got cancer and you had to grow up quickly? Would that be appropriate or too personal? And similarly, a few other students have written, actually, it's really interesting that they say it in these exact terms. What if we never had a serious situation where we had to grow up? For example, my parents are very healthy and I've never had any quote unquote adult making experience.
Sure. Well,
Does that mean I have nothing to write about?
yeah, let me answer that because I've had situations in both of those times. So I've had, unfortunately, a number of students who have had a parent who's been sick with cancer or a parent who's died. Um, and it was very sad, of course. But they did write about it. But what they did write about was not necessarily, they didn't focus on the death of the parent or on the sickness or the illness of the parent. They focused on how it impacted them and how they had to rise to an occasion. So for example, one particular girl talked about how she had to take on more responsibility. She had to do shopping. She had to drive her sister places. She sort of had to do more things, but it also, in some ways, brought the family together because there was no room for any sort of back talk to parents because they were going through something so challenging. Another boy addressed that issue, not necessarily as an adult to child, but more as kind of a, I guess it would be, maybe it would have been a place where he felt comfortable, where he talked about building, he was a snowboarder, and he talked about building this snowboard ramp in his driveway and sort of all of the different things that he did. And then he brought it back to the fact that he did this because it happened right after his mother had passed away, and it was his way of dealing with the situation. And so his mother was sort of driving him to do something that he really loved, even though she was no longer there. So he kind of brought it in, but again, didn't focus on the death, but focused on the impact. To the other side.
Yeah, and I think that's a very classic question. I mean, many kids are fortunate that they haven't had something traumatic or a major event that they feel they can write about. But sometimes it could be something very small. Mm-hmm. It could be something within one of their school activities mm-hmm. where they were on the staff, and then the next thing they were advising somebody about how to, pick the pieces for the literary magazine. It could be somebody who worked, I worked with a student last year who was a theater person, and something with a change of leadership on the staff forced this student to sort of step into more of a leadership role. Now, again, these weren't the prompts for last year, but when we look back, we said right. that would have been an example of a childhood to adulthood, because it's really transitioning your role from when you were more taking, you were following directions to where you were leading.
Where you were leading and you were doing them, exactly. So that could certainly work. All right, so now let's talk a little bit. Are there any other questions on that, Dan, that came up?
Not on that. There are some other questions, but I think you'll be getting to those points later.
Great. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the goal of the supplements. So one of the things that you want to kind of think through, and we always like to sit down with our students and do a supplement plan. So you want to look at, and this College Essay Organizer is really great for doing that, and we have all of our clients subscribe to it. And the way that we work it is that we identify what their personal statement's going to be about, and then we look at supplements if they have them, and then we try to identify how they're going to show the different sides of their personality and talents through the different essays. And so we're going to show you an example of how we've done that with the student. But that's really what the goal of the supplements. It's also to show academic interests and how you'll pursue them at a given school.
Right, and we're going to talk about that in a later slide about how to specifically do that.
Okay. Another way that the supplements are to show intellectual curiosity, and as we show you the different types of supplements, you'll see how you can do that. Typically that's linked in with either, it could be a specific question about, Stanford asks, describe a moment that had your showed your intellectual vitality or helped develop your intellectual vitality. That's because that's very important to them. Columbia might ask a question about the books that you've read and how they've impacted you. Carnegie Mellon also asks that question to list 3 books and write a sentence about their impact. So that's really looking at intellectual curiosity.
And another goal really of a supplement is to show how you think. Mm-hmm. So sometimes a question may seem quite quirky, but in fact, they really want to see how you will approach that question. And that is a way for you to demonstrate how you think through a problem or how you think through a question.
Right. And we'll get to some examples about that. The other thing that's really important in the supplements, and this is why it's really good to do a supplement plan before you even start writing, so that you're not A, writing a new essay every time for the schools, but B, to make sure that you kind of have the big picture of what you're trying to communicate. That you want to have a consistent message that runs through your entire application, but you don't want to repeat the same story in different ways. So an example, if we go back to the boy who was talking about the environment of music and junior statesmen being, being a leader and having collaboration, and that was an environment that he really enjoyed. So when he had to write about his short answer to talk about an activity and to go at it a little bit differently, he was very involved musically. That was kind of his thing, but he chose to talk about being the drum major in marching band. And so rather than talking about music specifically, he talked about leadership of a larger group of musicians and how he had to manage his peers and also put together a really great show and continue to improve. So it was sort of the theme that ran through was music and collaboration, but he showed it in lots of different ways.
Really the last, which is communicating fit with the target organization. I mean, this one you really need to do your homework because you have to know sort of the culture of the target institution. But an example would be for a school or university that really values community service. This would be something that you would want to communicate in an essay because that would be very relevant for that particular school.
Exactly. Like a school like Tulane, community service is a big part of who they are. Any of the Jesuit colleges, that's a big part of who they are. So they want to kind of make sure that that is also a big part of who you are and finding that fit.
We're just going to review some of the most common types of questions that we see on supplements. And really the first one is the why college or why major question. I think this is probably the most common one that is asked. We're going to go in detail in another slide about actually how to approach this question, but in some cases this can be two separate questions. There could be a why college question and a why major question, or it can be combined. Why do you want to study what you want to study at this particular college? And really the key here is that it needs to be specific. It needs to be appropriate for the school. And one of the things I wanted to, when Lisa and I were preparing for this, why it's really good to do a supplement plan is I was working with a student who wants to study engineering. And that really is, I mean, I knew going into this that that would be a very easy essay for him to write, the why major question. And actually, when we went through and looked at the colleges he was applying to, nobody asked that question. And so instead, we flipped that, and that became his central story for his personal statement. So that's why sometimes you need to step back and look at this in its entirety and make a choice about how to, where to position different essays.
Right. And also sometimes to that point, sometimes you'll see with the supplements, one of the supplements that they ask really actually works very well for your main essay. And so you might want to use one of the supplemental essays for that school's main essay. So an example, I had a student who wrote an essay about sort of her quirky interest in hats and how that theme ran through her life and how it shaped her. And then she also wrote a question about her interest in helping homeless and community service. But one of the supplemental questions for her top choice school was describe something quirky about your personality. And she really liked the hat essay and wanted to use it for almost all of her schools, but it answered the supplemental question much better. So she kind of flipped it around and made alternate versions to do that. So another type of supplement would be how will you contribute to the diversity on campus? That's typically asked of a larger state university because they are so diverse. And so when you think about this, it doesn't have to just be ethnic or racial diversity. There's religious diversity, there's diversity of thought, there's diversity of interests, there's geographic diversity depending on where you're applying. There's lots of different ways that you can be diverse. So you need to kind of think through that in a broader sense.
Another very popular supplement is to write a short essay about an activity of interest. And a good way to think about this is not to describe the activity, because in fact they know what DECA is or they know what Model UN is, but it's why that's important to you, what you've learned by doing that. And often this can be a nice way to contrast something that you've written in your personal statement. So if in your personal statement you've written about some of your artistic pursuits, but you really are truly intellectually curious about something, well, that may be the opportunity to highlight that in this activity
Essay, exactly. Another one that's pretty popular is the community essay. So it's, describe one of your communities and your role in it, or describe a community and how it shaped you. So in this one, again, it's really a matter of colleges are a series of communities. They're one large community, and then there's pockets of smaller communities within that. So the goal behind this question is to try to get at how you're going to contribute to a community within the university or the college. So if they can see that you've done that and you've played a significant role in a community before, then that's what you want to be showing here, is to really describe that role that you've played. And the other thing is, be clear about that. So you might be a leader in one role, you might be the devil's advocate. There's lots of different ways that you can do that. And we've had students describe things from a church or a temple community, to a camp community, to a work community, to just a group of friends that they have, and how each one of them has a different role within that community.
So let me interject one quick question, guys, because a few people have asked about how to address the question, why college X? Why am I applying here?
We're going to do that one
next. That's
on the next slide. So we're going to do that, okay?
Excellent.
We just want to finish going through this one. So
okay, the next one is really to describe a book and its impact on you. Sometimes it can be a book, it could be a piece of music, a piece of art. And, one of the things we were talking about earlier today is, what do you do for the students who really aren't readers? This can be a challenge sometimes.
Right, and so some of the ways that you can do it is, if it's not necessarily a book, maybe you like nonfiction, maybe you read a lot of newspapers, or you read a lot of websites or blogs, and so you can kind of fudge it a little bit if there's something like that, because they're really just trying to get at how something in the written form has impacted you. Even if it's a graphic novel or a comic book, that could be something that you can use. The last type of questions are these off-the-wall, quirky questions, sort of the Where's Waldo, to tweet or not to tweet, what's your favorite word and why. And this is, again, just getting at how do you respond to these. These are typically at schools like Tufts, University of Chicago, Wake Forest. They're sort of known for their quirky essays. And we often find that if a student has no idea how to answer these questions, it's probably indicative that it might not be the best fit for them. But students who get really excited about these questions, then that's kind of a self-selection that it's something that's a good fit for them. All right, so now let's move on to exactly that question, Dan, which is the why college, why major essay.
Right, and this one is a challenge for students, and this is one that really requires that a student does some pretty significant research before writing this essay, because you have to be very familiar with what a college offers and how that fits with what you're looking for. So what we advise our students is to start with you and your goals and interests, and then to segue into specific ways that this college or university meets your goals and interests. So what courses interest you? This requires going into the website, going into the major, looking at the curriculum. Are there specific professors that are doing research that really, on a topic that really interests you? If so, identify that in this essay. Are there clubs that you would join or sports that you would like to play? And again, you need to be specific. If it's marching band and they call it marching band, say you want to join university marching band. If it's called something else, the pep band, use that. The more specific that shows that you have done your homework is really important. And then it's really communicating the match about how you see yourself taking advantage of the things that are on the campus, especially if you've had an opportunity to visit the campus. This is where you can highlight that. When you were there and you saw this, you could see yourself on this campus. You could see the match.
Exactly. And what you're trying to do is show them that match. A lot of colleges say this is the question that they read first, because they want, after they read that essay, you want them to be able to see you and your 4 years and how you're going to spend it there and why it's going to be a good match for you.
And sometimes we actually, with the students we've worked with, will say, you know what? You could take the college name that you put in there and pop in another small liberal arts college. So this isn't specific enough.
That's right.
And the college will do the same thing. If they feel like they could substitute their name for one of their peers, then you haven't gone far enough in pointing out why it's a good fit for you.
Right. And the other thing that's important is you should do the brochure test. if it reads like it's the college's brochure, you haven't done a good job of writing this essay, because they know, especially the Ivies, they know they're a top university. They know they have prestigious professors. They know it's a world-class education. They know it's a beautiful campus. That's not why you want to go to that college. I mean, maybe it is, but that's not what's going to get you into the Y college major. It really has to be very specific. And oftentimes what's kind of interesting is when you do your research and you really do your homework, you start to see that maybe a school isn't as good a fit as you think, and vice versa. Maybe a school you didn't realize has this unbelievable program, and that's exactly what you want. And that's the kind of excitement and specificity that colleges want to see on that.
So Dan, do you think that addressed the questions that you've been seeing?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the key thing always when you're dealing with that is don't regurgitate the college's own brochure, which is the classic trap so many students fall into. Really talk about your own intellectual and personal passions and interests and curiosities, and how that college might cultivate those interests, because then you're really talking about yourself.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So the next type of questions were school-specific applications. So these are questions outside of the common application. And what you'll find is that a lot of these questions are similar to what you'll find for the college application prompts. So you can sort of repurpose and reuse these essays. Sometimes you might need to add or tweak it slightly, but really try to see if there's some overlaps with the other endings, with the other essays.
Really, and to that point, sometimes it literally will only require changing a few sentences to directly address a prompt. I remember one that we worked on together a few years ago was your favorite word and why, and we were able to pull from another essay. It was very clear to identify a word, but then we just had to help the student change a few sentences at the beginning and the end.
Right.
And then I think the last piece of advice is you don't need to read these essay prompts too literally. I mean, you need to answer the question, but you can be creative in the way you respond to see if some of the other essays that you've written will work.
And College Essay Organizer, when they do the overlap, that's a good starting point. I would say you still have to kind of really read it and make sure that it's 100% accurate, but it is a really great starting point, and it's a good place to start to see that you don't have to write as many essays as you originally think you're going to have to write.
Right. So Lisa and Beth, quick question. A bunch of people are asking whether or not optional means really optional.
It depends on the school, and it depends on what it's optional for, but usually optional means do it anyway. The time where it's optional is the additional information. If the additional information is really optional because it's asking if there's anything that reflects that has impacted your abilities to succeed. So and we actually didn't talk about that. So if you do have something that's impacted it, like a family illness or your own illness or a learning disorder that wasn't diagnosed until later on in your career, or you moved or whatever it is, then you could certainly address that and explain the situation. But if you don't have anything, then that's optional. You don't need to write that because it's not adding anything to the application. But if it's an optional essay, I know like Harvard says, actually it isn't optional, but it's like whatever else you want to provide for us, you should provide them something else. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my feeling is, the college essay is your opportunity to finally be in control. Your transcript is behind you, and your test scores, your tests are taken under pretty stressful conditions. Writing your college essays is your one opportunity to really be in the driver's seat and craft the way the colleges perceive you. And so for me, optional always means opportunity, and I really encourage kids to take advantage of it. But they, like you said, they certainly shouldn't force it if they have really nothing else to add.
Right, and that's really just the additional information part. Other than that, and that specifically, the question is there anything that you need to add to explain something that's gone on? So that's the only one where I say if you don't have anything, no need to put that in. All right, so what we wanted to do now is we wanted to just do a case study of one of our clients, one of my clients that I worked with, and this is also in part of the book. And so you'll kind of get a sense of how this student used all of her essays to kind of share her story and to show all the different parts of her. So this first slide is really just a tool that we use with our students to try to help them identify what their strengths and weaknesses are, and to really sort of see where they can stand out, recognizing that not everybody has all of these things, but to sort of identify what are the things in your application wheel. And I'll show you how that works with Feydi. So this is Feydi's application wheel, and this was sort of at the end, actually at the beginning of her senior year. So for Feydi, she had very strong academics and test scores. She was in the top 10% of her class. She had a very rigorous curriculum. She had solid test scores. They weren't as high as her grades, but they were still very strong. And she ran on the track team, and she wanted to continue running in college. She was very interested in pre-med, so she had participated in a mini medical school program at Rutgers. She had some decent leadership. She'd organize events and fundraisers to start a school in Nigeria with her father. Her biggest piece, though, of the pie was her other category. So she was an underrepresented minority who was interested in science. She was a first-generation American whose parents were born in Nigeria. She had a strong connection to that Nigerian culture and heritage. And she went to a suburban sort of middle upper class high school. So she was often the only African American student in most of her high level AP and honors classes. And she also had a really exceptional work ethic. She did have a financial need, and so she wanted to make sure that she was able to get any scholarships that were available, both merit and then also some needs-based money. All right, so let's see how this worked out for her. So for her main personal statement, she really wanted to show how the two sides of her background came together. She felt a place where she felt most comfortable was on the track team. And so in her beginning of her essay, she wrote that in my life, I feel like I maintain two distinct personas, a public and a private one. As the daughter of Nigerian immigrants, I have felt the need to create a public reputation of being studious, responsible, and determined. In private, I am more energetic and open. I have nothing to prove with my family because they love me unconditionally. Track and field is one area where there's these two diverse personalities fused together. My public and personal personas disappear whenever I step onto the track because there I am only proving something to myself. So she kind of sets up for us and she's sort of answering the question of a place where you feel perfectly content. So now she goes on to show how her strong work ethic, which was part of that pie that we had before, really kind of drives her into that. So what she says is, I was the first one on the track for practice and the last one to leave. I helped lead stretches, which showed my coach that I could be a leader while also cooperating with others. I ran while I was at home with the help of my dad, and I ran my hardest during practices. So this, again, shows her strength of character and shows some of those personal qualities that she has. And then finally, she gets at the motivation behind her hard work and why she's so content on the track field. She says, track requires more than just bookwork and letter grades. It tests my endurance, my strength, my speed, and my team dynamic. In track, I found an outlet, a place where I had a balance, a place where I did not need to impress people at school or follow the Nigerian traditions. I found a place where I could strive because of my own personal talents. When I am on the track, I have no boundaries, troubles, or woes. So interestingly, this was written before this year, but it actually answers the prompt of describe a place or an environment where you feel perfectly content really well. So that was her main essay. And then she had a number of schools that she was applying to. And so she had a lot of different supplemental essays that she needed to address. So she had the why school essay for University of Pennsylvania, Tufts, and Boston University. She had, and so in that essay, she really talked very specifically about the programs, the way she felt when she was on campus, how she could see herself interacting, doing research, doing pre-med, getting involved in different activities. The next essay was describe a time when you have been transformed, and that was for Villanova, and that was also an optional essay, so to your point, for Penn when they had that essay, and of course she chose to do that. And so for the time she had been transformed, she talked about her experience attending the National Young Leaders Conference as a shy freshman, and she described a leadership exercise that helped shape the group and herself. And then she talks about how on that first evening, everybody was had to do an activity called the human knot. And it sort of became this competition for everyone to kind of unknot themselves. And since everybody was kind of unknown and they weren't a group, a cohesive group, they came in dead last. But by the end of the week, they worked together, they communicated more, and then she sort of emerged as a leader. And that showed how she had been transformed. So the next essay group that she had to write, and this was really for almost all the schools, was describe an activity and its importance. And for this one, it was kind of a tricky thing because her activity that she chose to describe was helping her father with a charity that they had developed to set up schools in Nigeria. And the tricky part was that it was her father's activity that he had started, but she had to show how that was important to her. And so what she did is she showed how, because of this activity and because of this modeling, she wanted to become a doctor and set up clinics in Nigeria, and that she had been doing this, her entire high school career. The next grouping was what is your academic interest and how can it be met at the school? And here again, she talked about all of the experiences that she had, the pre-summer college programs in medicine, and she had done a mini-med program at Rutgers Medical School. And so she talked about how that kind of led to her interest in science and why she's interested in it and why she wants to be a doctor. The next grouping was for, this was an essay that we kind of combined. So it was, how has your family background influenced you? And then, is there a person of influence? And so for Tufts, the question was, let your life speak. And for Princeton, the supplemental question was, is there a person who's had an influence on you? And in this instance, she brought in her very strong Nigerian background and her mother, who had come here when she was in college, and how she really instilled in her a very strong work ethic and this idea that she could do anything that she set her mind to. And she gave an example of, during this mini-med program, where she was, having to memorize a lot of words and she didn't think she could do it, but her mom really instilled in her the confidence that she could do anything. And as a result, she ended up getting the highest grade in that particular program. So again, this thread of medicine and interest in medicine and the Nigerian background ran through all of her essays, but in very different ways and different parts, it was able to show a full picture. And then the final essay that she had to write, which was for the Villanova Presidential Scholarship, which was a full, essentially a full ride to Villanova, was how had diversity played a role in your life? Now, interestingly, she was certainly diverse, but she went to a high school where she was the only African-American student there in most of her classes. So she kind of talked about how she was really driven to be a role model and to sort of demonstrate that, in her essay she wrote that, I want to be an example of, many of my friends did not know a lot about foreign countries, so I felt that I could be a representative for my home country. I wanted to show that all African nations were not third world countries filled with uneducated individuals. And that really drove her to be successful and to sort of always be the best. So that, again, gets behind her mindset of why she works so hard.
Work ethic. And
exactly, the work ethic, the Nigerian connection. So all of those different essays was how she, kind of demonstrated all of the things that we showed you on the wheel.
All right, let me just jump in. I have a question I think you guys will enjoy answering.
Okay.
Passion is obviously something that it's a buzzword that's thrown around. And a few students are writing about or asking about whether or not they should write about their passion or weave it in every one of their essays and supplements. And some students are saying, I don't really have a passion. I'm a good student. I work hard. I'm active in certain things, but I'm not truly passionate about anything. And one student even says, how is an 18-year-old kid supposed to know what he wants to do for the rest of his life? So how do you kind of address that issue of writing about your passion, not writing about it simply because you don't have one, making something up because you think that's what the college wants to see? And then one other student asks, is declaring an undecided major a bad thing because I'm not passionate about anything right now?
no, I think if you have a passion, you should clearly write about it, and that should be a thread that comes through. But we work with many, I'd say the majority of students are undecided at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But you can write about that while you don't have a particular major, you're interested in history, American studies, and English, and you want to explore those opportunities, or you're interested in the sciences and math, and while you're there, you're hoping to develop it. And again, looking at the specificity of the school, something either about the way the distribution requirements work, or a core curriculum, or a freshman seminar, and how that could help you, work toward finding that passion or that intellectual, spark. That's something that you absolutely can write, that you're hoping that's going to happen in the future.
Exactly. And I had a student that I worked with who was exactly that. She was a good student, she was a solid student, she ran track, she had Model UN, she was good at math and science, but she didn't really, have a passion for anything. And her mother was really pushing her to study engineering. And I don't know if any of you listening have that idea as well, but she said, look, you're a girl, you're math and science, you want to do engineering. And the mother was like, look, I really want you to, get her to study engineering. I said, okay, well, let's look and see if there's any engineering that's of interest. And so interestingly, as we started and as she started really researching the different types of engineering, we quickly ruled out, didn't like mechanical, didn't like electrical, didn't like civil. None of those were of interest to her. And then all of a sudden she struck on environmental engineering. And she started digging in and started looking at the different courses and looking at the different things that it would involve. And lo and behold, she actually found that she had done something like this in Model UN that she kind of had forgotten about. And that she really was interested in developing ways for sustainable energy and things like that. And all of a sudden, she found a passion that she didn't even realize that she had. And she really only discovered it by digging in and seeing what the classes are and what's being offered. So for those of you who don't have a passion, sometimes it's a matter of you don't have a passion because sometimes high school is just not that interesting. But if you start looking at different classes and you start looking at different offerings in colleges, or you start talking to people, all of a sudden you might find something that you're really interested in that has nothing to do with what you've studied in high school.
Excellent. Thank you. So here's another question. It says,
Sure.
and by the way, just as a caveat, obviously every student is different, and we try our best to answer some fairly general questions, but just realize that certainly in light of the question I'm about to ask, it's hard for us to give you specific guidance because we don't know that much or really anything else about you. So just take everything we say, and just consider it in the context of your broader application. So the question is, if you're strong in academics, is it better to write your essay about academics or about extracurricular things? So it's a fairly broad question, and obviously it does not take into account that many colleges ask many different questions. But let's say there's just one question that says, "Tell us something about yourself."
Well, I think that if you're stronger in academics, is there anything, and I guess it really depends on, are there other things that you like to do? I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be a typical extracurricular activity. I mean, maybe you're interested in pop culture, maybe you're interested in sports, maybe you're interested in something that has nothing to do with an extracurricular activity, or maybe there's something that happened in your life. I think it's not an either or. I mean, the more specific questions like, why do you want to major in this, or why do you have these academic interests, then you should definitely write about your academic interests. But I don't usually we don't often recommend that you just talk about academic interests in your main essay, because you're much more than just your academic interests. So I think, as Dan said, without knowing you and knowing sort of what drives you, what motivates you, it's hard to say one versus the other.
But there are cases where if that is somebody's central story,
Yes.
like they are just passionate about politics, say,
Yes.
and part of their academic profile is that they're taking all the AP history classes, sure, and they participate in Model UN or Youth in Government and things, then it would be a logical step that might be something that they would write about. But I guess we don't start it that way with our students, saying, yeah, oh, you're more academic, you should write about one of your academic interests. Right. You're more into the arts, you should write about that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's sort of the opposite. Like sometimes we might say, well, you're applying for engineering, so we don't necessarily want your main essay to be about engineering. We want to show a different side of you. So it's, again, as Beth said, we don't really start with academics or extracurricular. We sort of start with what drives you. What excites you. And again, if you're saying you don't have passion, you have to be interested in something. And it could be something as simple as you really like to watch South Park, or you really like to, you're really interested in the Game of Thrones or something like that. And what is it about that kind of generates a strong interest? I had one student who wrote her essay. She's at Dartmouth this year, and she wrote her essay about her interest in food, and she described. She said, I got my start at the the village trattoria. And then she talked about her experience mixing different foods and trying to hide from the waiter the sort of crazy concoctions of food that she made. And it really was just about her quirkiness and her kind of playfulness and her ability to sort of take risks in food as a metaphor for taking risks in other things.
Excellent. So I have a few other questions, if you guys don't mind. I know we're closing in on 9 o'clock, New York time at least. And I just want to highlight that again. If we haven't answered your question directly, we'll probably get back to you via email. If you want to email us your question, we prioritize members who have upgraded to a roadmap or expert access simply because we get hundreds of requests and questions a day. But you can also join another webcast. And one other thing is we'll be doing a contest like we do at the end of every webcast in just a few minutes, so that the winner will win the opportunity to submit one of his or her essays to us and get our expert feedback on it. So always a highlight of the hour because the contest is fun. So okay, so question here says, one of my college essays asks, and this goes back to the passion question, but I think in a more pragmatic way. It's a really tough question. One of my college essays asks, what are your life goals and what are you doing or planning to do to achieve it? What if I don't have or know my goals? So this is that tricky thing with not do you not necessarily have a passion right now, but you certainly don't know where that passion is going to lead. So how do you answer that kind of question?
Well, I mean, I think, it doesn't have to necessarily be a career choice, but maybe your life goal is to find a career that you really love. That could be your life goal. And so if that's your life goal, that you want to find something that you are passionate about, because so far you haven't found that, and then you could sort of walk through all the different classes that interest you and all the different ways that you're going to explore different subjects in different areas and ways that you're going to get involved. Your life goal could be that you want to be financially, be able to support yourself financially. So maybe you can identify ways that you could do that. Maybe that you want to travel and see the world. There's lots of different ways that you can have a life goal. It doesn't have to be so specific, but sort of in a more general sense. And that's where you get.
And I think that's the point about not taking the questions too literally.
Right.
This is a way that you can really sort of step back from that question a bit and say, what are the things that really do interest me? Like Lisa just said, if it's travel, if you want to be you want to have a life that's going to have an international component, you can talk about all the things that you're going to do in terms of studying language or continuing with the language, doing study abroad, exploring different courses that you could take that could lead to careers that could have an international component. So again, I think you can kind of step back from the question a bit and broaden it.
Exactly. I think the broader you are, and then you bring in the specificity of how you can get there, it makes it not seem so daunting.
Okay, so here's another. Is it okay if I ask a few more questions, or do you guys want to go on to the next step?
You know what? We're okay. We're opening for questions.
Right.
Now.
We were just going to review different, tools that you can use, which are the Common App, College Essay Organizer, people like us, your high school guidance counselor.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So why don't we do this?
I'm doing a shameless plug for my book that's coming out in the spring, so that'll be out for.
Gotcha. So why don't you guys touch on that, and if you can, highlight the now well-known issue with the Common App, where many of the questions are not appearing. For a lot of required programs. NYU is a classic example where regardless of what major you express an interest in or academic program, the Common App supplement for NYU will tell you that you have only one essay to write, when in reality there are more than 20 different essay questions for various programs, whether it's Gallatin or Stern or Tisch, that aren't even alluded to on the Common App. That's obviously one of the benefits of using College Essay Organizer. So if you guys want to touch on those different tools, and
I think that the Common Application is definitely going through growing pains, just because or changing pains. I don't know what to call it. So there are some glitches, and so it's important to just be on top of the schools to which you're applying and making sure that all of the questions are indeed there. Ideally, once you put in your major or your intended major, it will populate the application with the questions that are relevant to that major. But as Dan said, there are some glitches in some of the schools. So, and I think that they're understanding of that if you don't get it in on time. But given that, Dan, if you use the College Essay Organizer, you'll be able to see what the various additional supplements are.
Right,
But
and we
just
actually
as
have
a,
more than 1,000 scholarship essay questions in our database, not one of which is mentioned in the Common App. So that's one great perk.
Right, and the Common App is not going to mention the scholarship questions typically, but some of the state schools have those questions. If you're interested in scholarship, you need to answer these questions, and if you don't, then you can't. Some of them have automatic consideration. Some of them have automatic consideration for some merit scholarships, but then others you actually have to apply for. So it's important to really know all of the questions that you have to answer before you get going.
right. But as a general rule, we're advising our students to, once they've entered a college, into the Common App, to make sure that they answer the questions first.
Yes.
So that if they are going to unlock one of these stealth essays, it's going to happen at the beginning and not when they think they are done,
Right.
and then realize that there actually is a writing supplement that they weren't aware of. But really the way, in addition to a tool like College Essay Organizer, is, going to the school's specific website and what their application requirements are. And if there's a mismatch,
Right.
you have to follow through on that.
And see what it is. And what Beth means by the college questions is once you enter into the Common Application, there's a section that says My Colleges. And then in that My Colleges section, it says questions. So you should really start with that section after you've filled everything out, because then that will give you any additional essay questions. Hopefully it'll give you all of them.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, there are a few other questions. Do you guys want to continue on, and then I'll circle back to a few more questions?
We'll do a few more.
We'll do a few more.
All right, excellent. So let me see. Any question coming up? So some of these questions you just addressed. Let me go through them. Hold on.
Okay.
So someone just asked the question, not necessarily related to essays, but maybe something you can answer. Is the Common App limited to only 20 schools? I guess they're asking, can you add more than 20 schools to your Common App account?
You know what? I think that there might be a limitation, but I don't know the exact answer, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I actually think it's about 20. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it might. I think they did put a limitation on. And quite frankly, you shouldn't really be applying to more than 20 schools. That comes back to kind of knowing what you want.
Exactly. So one of the other questions here is, let's see, no, that's more about applying early decision. Yeah, I think there are a couple other questions I'll save to the very end, so you guys can jump back in.
Yeah, we're done with our presentation. So,
All right,
I mean,
super.
now's the time to ask if there's any other questions, and then we'll be at the end.
All right, there are a few questions I'm gonna pose, but while I'm asking these questions, each one of you can submit one more question. Again, there are a lot of people out there, so try to be judicious with the type of question if we've already answered it, and be very specific, so we don't have to connect back with you for clarification. But this is your opportunity to really ask your specific question and leave here knowing that you have a better sense of what your next step is. So fire away. In the meantime, here's an interesting question about leadership. So the question is essentially asking, I'm going to paraphrase because it's a little jumbled. The question is, I've never really been a leader in any way, but I'm a great person and have done some incredible things and I have made great achievements. But I don't see myself as a leader. How do I answer a question that is flat out asking about my leadership skills? Very
Well,
honest.
I think that leadership can be defined in many different ways. And so maybe you don't see yourself as the one out ahead of the pack, leading everybody, but maybe you're the one who's doing, organizing smaller events within a club, or maybe you have sort of leadership without a title, which is actually one of the a Columbia admissions officers called it. So you're still doing things, you're still organizing, you're still getting people together. That's a form of leadership. Maybe you're somebody who stands up for what you believe in, and that could be a form of leadership. So again, thinking outside of the traditional realm of what it means to be a leader, and see, I'm sure if you have a great person and you've done so accomplished great things, think through what it was about you that allowed you to accomplish those things. Was it pulling in people or influencing people to get to your goals? Was it really having a passion or an interest in something, and moving it forward, even if you did it alone, but you still had to have other people that somewhat helped you. So just think about it in a broader sense, and how you might be able to identify your type of leadership. It might not be a big brassy leadership, but maybe you're a quiet leader and you do things in a different way.
Okay, so here's another question. For the extracurriculars on the Common App, one of the college people that came to our school said we can upload a document instead of putting it in their format so we can elaborate more. How do we do that? I think they're probably asking about the activities section.
Yeah, you can no longer do that on the Common Application unless a school allows you to do it in their school specific area where you can upload a resume. So that would be the only way to do it. But what we would recommend, and some schools do allow you to upload a resume, and if they do, it would be pretty obvious because it will say enter in the activities or upload a resume. So you'll see that. Like, for example, Tulane allows you to upload a resume for certain parts of it.
Yeah, Elon.
What do you think
allows you
about
to.
using the Common App's additional information space to copy and paste in what's, essentially a resume?
Some people do that, but what we recommend is that you actually really enter them in very, very, in a very detailed but judicious way in the Common Application space that's provided. And then if you've gone really, really deep in a particular area and you can't get all of that information in, then absolutely you can put in that additional information in the additional information section, but only if it's far and above. If you can't get it all in the section, but don't short circuit the section just to upload it in the additional information. You really have to do that other section very, very carefully and well.
All right, excellent. So someone else asks, one of my college essays asks me to describe my community. The problem is that I've moved around quite a bit, and I'm not sure what community I can really classify myself in. How do I answer a question asking about a community or group I belong to if I have lived all over the country and my parents belong to separate religious communities? It's a very interesting lifestyle. I think that's pretty
What
cool.
was the separate one that you said? What was the last part of that, Dan?
Separate parents are different.
And my parents
Oh,
belong to
religion.
separate religious communities.
Okay. Well, I mean, in that instance, has your family had to be its own community because you've moved around so much? And so can you describe sort of, have you become a tighter knit family because you have that?
I mean, that's one. I don't know if they've moved internationally, but the other could be like the expat community could be your community, even though it's a different group each place you go. It's
the same
sort of community.
Right. That you've been a part of.
Right.
But again, try to think a little bit outside of it and sort of see, is there an online community that you're a part of?
Or is there an activity that you have done in the different places? So like, say you're on the golf team and you've played when you've lived in different places, that becomes your community each time, even though it's been in different, different cities, different schools.
Exactly.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So
let's take one more question.
All right, excellent. So a lot of great questions coming in now. Okay, so I'll ask this question. The question is, my essay is limited to 650 words. Cornell wants me to talk about 2 academic interests and why the school would be right for me. I also want to incorporate my Russian background. How do I cram all of this into 650 words? So do you feel like that's a question you can answer, or is it hard simply because you don't know the student?
Well, I mean, I don't know the student, but we can try to answer it. I mean, so depending on, I don't know what the majors are, so let's just assume that they're majors that are, so if they're majors that are in arts and sciences and they're more arts related, and somehow there's a connection with your Russian background that leads to it, you can integrate it that way. If it's something like, if you can only really put your Russian background in is if it actually fits with what you want to study. Or if it's made you more worldly or made you have a different way to do it. So I'll just give you an example of how a student did that for Cornell. he didn't have two majors, but he was interested in studying German, and he was interested in being an engineering major. So and he was also had some Native American, like very, very, very small background, maybe, great great grandfather. So what he talked about was first his interest in the engineering, and he talked about how he was a skier and he got interested in ski lifts, and then he was fascinated with how they worked and he wanted to do mechanical engineering to learn how to build ski lifts. And at Cornell, he would be able to do that. Then he also talked about how he could also study German because he had German family and he was really interested in that side of him. And that because he had this heritage of going to this Native American Indian camp, they actually had a Native American studies as a minor, and that he could take some classes in that. So he was able to, again, bring in all the different areas for Cornell in that essay.
But again, when you have a limit, that also is telling you the amount of detail and that they're expecting you to go into. While you have to be detailed about each of those individual things, you can't expand on every.
I mean, it was like a one-line thing. So his biggest essay or his biggest part was on the engineering piece because that was his main thing. And then maybe one or two sentences, because of my background of going to this camp, I want to also study Native American studies. And because I'm taking German in school, I want to continue my German. So it was one sentence. He didn't have to go into a lot of detail.
Excellent. Well, Lisa and Beth, thank you so much. You've been incredibly insightful and really entertaining, and there's been a lot of great positive feedback throughout the past hour where people are just saying thank you so much for your help and answering these questions. So we all thank you. We are now going to actually let you two pick the winner of our contest, which I will announce in one moment. Before I launch that, I have one last poll I want to ask. I just want to get a sense of how many people out there use College Essay Organizer. Again, you can create your account for free. Go to collegeessayorganizer.com. On the right side, you'll see where you can get all of your essay questions. And then you can upgrade to a roadmap if you want, especially that will help you with the Common App issue where many questions, especially for programs and scholarships, are not even mentioned on the Common App, and you might end up discovering that very late in the game. Or you can, of course, upgrade to Expert Access, and for a one-time fee of just $49 or less with a promo code, you'll get unlimited access to our archive of past webcasts and all future webcasts. So we hope to see you throughout the fall when we're covering various topics from financial aid and putting together your application and, of course, writing your essays. So it seems to me that about 5% are a student or parent with a free basic account. About 29% are student parent who has upgraded, and 73% are students or parents who have not yet used the site. So again, you can get started for free. There's no reason not to create your free account by going to collegeessayorganizer.com unless you really like wasting time and overlooking key questions. So let me close this poll. And now here's our contest. The winner, like I said, will be able to submit to us one essay that we'll provide expert feedback on. And the question is this, or actually the contest is this. Write the best first line of a college essay, something that makes us want to read that essay, something compelling and captivating and intriguing. I think some of the past winners were every time I go to Starbucks, I give them a different name. I love that. Another student once wrote, I'll never forget when I first learned that my uncle was really my aunt. Come on, who doesn't want to read that essay? So I'm going to read them all out loud. You can only submit one or send in one submission. So make it good. I'll give you about 2 minutes. The best first line of college essay. I'll read them all out loud. And Beth and Lisa will pick the winner. And so for the person who writes, can I still win if I'm using an iPad now? Some people using iPads are unable to actually submit questions and therefore may not be able to participate in this contest. So you may be out. I'm sorry. We need to be able to see your submission to win. Okay, I'm going to read this one out loud and we'll definitely mispronounce it. I never thought I would fall in love with phenolphthalein. With phenolphthalein, okay. A lot of consonants together. It certainly makes me want to look that word up, so I like that first line. I never thought I would fall in love with phenolphthalein. Would you like fries with that? You've probably heard, along with a host of other common misconceptions, that cows can't walk downstairs, but that's not true. Next one is growing up in a hybrid Syrian southern home, I participate in things like muddin, as well as Syrian traditions like baking kibbitz maru or paper bread. By the way, I'm not going to be able to read every single one. We have hundreds of submissions coming in. I will just read the ones that I think are the most likely candidates. So here's another one. That was the worst day of my life. Here's another. I know a place where pigs can fly and where there is always gold at the end of the rainbow. Here's another. I remember the first time my good friend Sam told me he had a brother. It was last Christmas. Next one. Staring at the impossible task ahead, I took a breath and stepped off into oblivion. Every time I need to blow my nose, I look at the color of really? Okay. Every time I need to blow my nose, I look at the color of what came out because it has been a gauge of where I am in life. A doctor once told me clear is fine, but dark yellow is complicated. All right. Next one is ever since I was a little boy, I've had a fascination with taking things apart and putting them back together. Okay. We got about 45 seconds left, so get your submissions in. The vice principal shakes my friend's hand and glanced at me. I am sorry. In quotes, I am sorry. My life is actually a joke. I keep a plastic cow in my pocket for good luck. I think the person meant heritage here. Heritage is the first word in my family dictionary and made me into who I am now. Somewhere along the line, buying video games became more thrilling than actually playing them. The most peculiar thing I realized about myself was that I was normal. A few more I'll read. English buzzed around me like a swarm of bees. Words blended together as if their meaning was meant to flow like a river over my little head. My hands are a history book. Imagine being academically successful while living in an environment surrounded by quarrels. And two more I'll read. I used to throw food at my church priest. Actually, that's the last one I'll read. Okay. Beth and Lisa, first of all, very creative submissions out there, especially spontaneous, off the cuff. Some really great creative minds out there. Lisa, Beth, do you have a winner for us?
I know we like two.
By the way, let me guess. You want me to read them all over again?
No, I kind of jotted them down.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Would you like fries? Should we say which ones we?
We'll say the two we like.
Say
Would
the
you
two
like
you like.
fries with that?
All right.
And I keep a
plastic cow in my
pocket.
I keep a plastic cow inside my pocket. And what was the other one?
Would you like fries with that?
Would you like fries with that? And that was in quotes. All right. So, do you guys want to pick the winner, or do you want to kind of put it to the crowd and let them decide?
I think I keep a plastic cow in my pocket.
There you go. The winner is I keep a plastic cow in my pocket. The person who submitted that can send us one essay at any time, and we will review it and provide expert feedback. So Lisa, Beth, again, thank you so much for spending the hour and 20 minutes now with us. And please feel free to reach out to Lisa and Beth directly at College Bound Mentor. You can look them up on Google. Google is a new website. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. And feel free to touch base with them if you would like to follow up. So again, thank you. We look forward to seeing you in other expert access webcasts during the fall. And for all those who are applying early and taking your final SATs and ACTs in the next few weeks, good luck and stay sane. Bye-bye.
Yeah, good luck to everybody.
Good luck. And remember, just write your story.
That's right.
Excellent. Thank you.
Bye-bye.